Every so often a story comes to me that not only tugs at my heartstrings but plays them like a fiddle while forcing me through a new kind of hell. You're about to hear one such story about a camping trip, a good man, and the thing in the woods that ruined the lives of an entire family. This well-paced and at times intense story comes to us from someone named Danny. He titled it Uncle Nick. My Uncle Nicholas was the best man I've ever known. The end of his story is the worst day of my family's life. But that's not where it starts, and it's not where he belongs. It starts on our living room floor with a deck of Yu-Gi-Oh cards. A grown man in his 20s sitting cross-legged and arguing trade values with a 7-year-old like it was the stock exchange. He was my dad's little brother by 6 years. He lived 20 minutes away, never had a wife or kids of his own, and he worked maintenance at the community college. He was at our house probably 3 nights a week. Every kid should get one adult like that. Somebody who's family but isn't in charge of you, who shows up with a Nintendo 64 game they rented, and no opinions about what your grades are. He's the one who had the gold Ocarina of Time cartridge, and he would bring it over in a plastic grocery bag, like it was illegal paraphernalia. My brother Aaron and I would fight about who got the controller, until Uncle Nick solved it the same as he usually did, which was that Aaron got to play, and I got to read the strategy guide out loud, being the boss of the map. Nick sat between us on the floor, leaning on the couch, calling out, "Watch for the ceiling hands," during the Shadow Temple. He didn't have to spend his weekends doing that, but he did it anyway for years. And he was a big camper. That was his whole other life. Nick was in the woods almost every weekend, sometimes alone or sometimes with a buddy. And he came back from those trips with stories that made my brother and I insane with wanting to go. One time he said a copperhead was in his boot, and on another time he said a black bear stole his entire cooler, carrying it off like a lunchbox. He would tell these stories at our kitchen table, his hands doing little recreations. My mom would say, "Nicholas, now they're not going to get any sleep." And he'd wink at us, and we would in fact not sleep. We'd either be creeped out, or talking about how cool that was, or we'd talk about what we would do if we were in that situation. He begged my dad for years to let him take us. I mean years. I was there for a lot of the begging. Nick didn't do it privately. He would do it at dinner, like a lawyer making a motion he knew would get denied. "Dave, it's car camping. The truck is right there the whole time." When Danny's older. Aaron's 9 though. I was sleeping outside alone at 9. "And look how you turned out," my dad would say, and Nick would grab his own chest like he was shot. That was the routine over and over for years. It was never really a fight. My dad wasn't scared of the woods and he wasn't scared of Nick. He just had a thing, which I understand now that I have my own kids, that thing about both of his sons being somewhere he wasn't. "When Danny's 10, he finally said one night, when I was 8 years old, to get Nick to stop asking. Both of them together though, or neither, and when Danny is 10. So the year I turned 10 was the year. All of that history is why the first trip was what it was to us. It wasn't just a camping trip. It was the thing we had literally been waiting for a third of our lives. Nick showed up that afternoon with the truck already loaded, and a brand new sleeping bag for each of us, tags still on them, which on his paycheck was not nothing. My mom took a picture of the 3 of us by the tailgate that I still have, and in it, Nick's smiling so big his eyes are shut. He took us to a spot he just kept calling the Pines, in the National Forest a couple hours from home. He'd picked it for us, I understood later. A beginner spot, with an easy half-mile walk in from where you park, a big flat established site, and a fire ring already there. There was even a creek down the hill you could hear from your tent. Nothing about it was scary or hard. He spent that whole first day being the best version of a person I've maybe ever seen, teaching us to set up a tent and then took it down and made us do it ourselves. Then we all cheered like idiots when we set it up. He let Aaron use the hatchet under supervision. Then we cooked hot dogs and s'mores, and then, because we were still hungry, the way boys usually are, a second round of hot dogs. It was the best day of my childhood up to that point. Full stop. And it stayed the best day right up until about 9 o'clock that night. Because after dark, Nick got out the flashlights and said, "You want to see something cool?" And he took us down to the creek. That part was his tradition, I found out at the funeral, from a buddy he used to camp with. Nick liked to walk to water in the dark and turn the flashlight on the creek because the crawdad eyes shine back at you like little coals. And it worked. It was really cool. We crouched on the rocks. Aaron caught one with his hands, and it pinched him. I've never laughed harder. 10 years old, pitch dark woods, my uncle's hand on the back of my jacket so I didn't go into the creek. My brother was yelping and flapping his hand. That was probably still the best hour of my childhood. We started back up the hill to camp around, 10. We went single file on the path. Aaron was in front with a flashlight, and I was in the middle, with Nick behind me. We were about halfway up, when Nick put his hand on my shoulder and said to us, "Hold up," quietly. He clicked his light off and told Aaron to click his off too. We stood in the dark. Then I heard what he had been hearing. Footsteps, off to our left and up the slope in the leaves. They weren't too close, but they were moving. Then they would stop, and I remember thinking even at 10 years old, that not hearing it move anymore was the scarier part. It seemed to stop only a moment after we stopped. "Deer?" Aaron said. "Probably," Nick said. He then moved me by the shoulder so I was in front of him and moved himself to the back of our line, in reference to us in the sound. And he said, "Keep walking on up, guys. Don't run, just walk on." So we walked, and then the footsteps continued, walking too alongside us. I know I was young and it was dark, so I know I've had a lot of years to bend this memory, but this part I'd swear to in court. The steps kept pace with us off to our left the whole way up that hill in the leaves, matching us, and every time we'd stop for a second at Nick's hand, they'd take 1 or 2 more steps and stop too, always just a little bit late. About halfway back, Nick started to talk, real loud and cheerful. But I knew him, I knew his voice. That was his fake voice. He was saying, "Almost there, boys. Hot chocolate when we get up. Who wants some hot chocolate?" It was the first time in my life I ever heard an adult be scared. He was talking to put a wall of sound between us and the left side of the dark. We got to camp and the fire had burned down to almost nothing. Nick told us to sit tight at the picnic table, together, and he went to build the fire back up, constantly looking over at us, making sure we were still where we should be. But the fire just wouldn't go. I didn't understand at the time what I was watching. I've camped my whole life since, thanks to him, so I know exactly now what I was seeing. A man who had built 1,000 campfires could not get a fire to restart from live coals. He put dry pine straw on coals that were still orange and it sat there. It didn't catch and curl the way pine straw does, even if you just look at it wrong. He got down and blew on it and the coals brightened, but the straw just sat there. Then he quit pretending it was a normal problem. He went to the truck box and came back with a bottle of charcoal starter and squeezed half that bottle on the whole ring, then struck a lighter to it. I watched a lighter flame touch starter fluid, and nothing happened. He struck it and touched it again. Nothing. The third time he was saying something under his breath. It wasn't even cussing is the thing. I was close enough to hear that it wasn't. Years later, I'd figure out what it probably was. His lips were moving in the same little rhythm you see at church. He was praying. The steps came back, down at the edge of the site, past the tents in the dark where the ground slopes to the creek. They were faster now, lighter and faster. A rush of steps, followed by quiet, then another rush of steps, closer, and my whole life I found only one word for the sound, and I hate that word. Skittering. Like something with more feet than it needed, coming up the hill in bursts. That's when Aaron grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise it. Nick stood up between us, facing that darkness with a lighter in his fist. And suddenly, by some weird chance, the fire caught. It blazed, too, thanks to all of the starter fluid he had poured on it. That thing just decided suddenly, oh yeah, I'm a fire, I should probably start now. So the whole ring all at once went up, with a sort of whump that I felt on my face. This hot orange daylight punched out 30 feet in every direction, basically a bit of an explosion. And at the edge of that new light, right where it died into the trees, there was a face going backward. I have only one frame of it, like a frozen frame of a video game. Just that single, still image in my head, because that's as long as it lasted in that moment. That's how long that face was there. Its eyes were open. Its face was so long and pale, with cheeks sunk in so deep, the head looked more like skull than face. It was pulling out of the light as fast as it could, as if the light burned it. But it was gone instantly, enshrouded by the dark and heading fast into the woods. We were left in that camp then, with an orange and flickering normalness. Nobody said anything for a second. Then Nick said, "There it goes," in a weird, bright voice. And then Aaron said, "What was that?" Nick said, "Oh, that was just a big ol' owl. The fire probably spooked it." He then made us hot chocolate in a hurry, but his hands were shaky, I could see that. I watched him miss the cup a bit when he was pouring things in there. He told us owl facts for 20 minutes in that same bright voice. We wanted to believe him so bad that we mostly did. I'd say by bedtime I was 80% convinced it was an owl. We were kids. We wanted the world to be okay, whether we were right or wrong. That night, I woke up way late, hours in with Aaron dead asleep next to me. I heard a voice outside the tent, a calm and conversational voice, coming from out past our fire ring. It sounded like Uncle Nick, but I couldn't hear the exact words, just a tone, steady, back and forth, with these silent patches where the other half of a conversation would go. I remember thinking, okay, Uncle Nick's talking to someone, and feeling completely safe about that. After all, to me, Uncle Nick's voice was calm. So I rolled back over and went to sleep. 10-year-old logic. The voice was calm, so everything was fine. I heard one word clear as I was going under. I'll never be sure if it's a real memory or something my brain built. But the word was okay. Twice, with a space in between. Okay. Okay. Like an agreement was made. We told our parents about the owl that we had spooked at our campsite. Nick backed us up, telling them about it in a funny way. Then in later retellings, he did a whole bit about how the owl stole my hot dog. That trip went into our family legend as a giant success. And honestly, as far as any of us knew, it was one. He had us begging to go again. It took a while. Uncle Nick seemed to get busier than ever after that. But the next year, he took us out again, to a different spot, a lake this time, for a camping/fishing trip. The fishing trip is where I first saw that something was wrong with Uncle Nick. It was small stuff. He was still Nick, still funny and endlessly patient, tying our hooks on. Aaron and I produced nothing but birds' nests of fishing line for the first 2 days. But something in him had changed. Something I couldn't put my finger on yet. He checked behind us frequently. On the trail, at the boat launch, at the fire, he had this new habit of turning around, casually but very frequently, like stretching his back and reading the trees for a second, before turning back to whatever we were doing. He parked the truck nose out, keeping the fire real big, way bigger than a cook fire needs to be, and he fed it constantly. When Aaron mentioned it, poking fun at him by calling him a pyromaniac, Nick grinned and said, "Fire's the whole point of camping, bud, and I don't want to risk that same situation from last time, remember?" We did remember, and I didn't like to remember. I watched him throw another log on the fire. He was wearing a whistle now, too, a small plastic whistle on a cord around his neck the whole trip. He looked like a camp counselor. When I asked what it was for, he said, "If we ever get separated, 3 blasts means come to me. You hear 3 whistles, you drop the fishing pole, everything you're doing, and you come find me." Then he made us practice it out loud like a fire drill, both of us reciting the whistle roll back. It's a completely normal safety thing. They teach it in Scouts, so I'm told. It was also brand new, the 4th trip of my life, and he had never once mentioned it before. On the 3rd night, we were at the fire, stuffed on crappie he'd fried in a pan, and Aaron, who was 13 at the time, and had recently discovered the joy of scary stuff, goes, "Hey, Uncle Nick, what's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you out here? You gotta be for real, too. Not like you ran into a bear or something." Nick poked at the fire with a stick. Then he told us this, and I can hear it all in my head like it happened yesterday. "All right, I'll go for it one time. If your mom asks, we talked about fishing, though, deal?" We nodded. "Well, when I was 19, way before you two existed, I went out by myself to a piece of forest north of the Pines. It was further in than I'd ever been, way off trail. I was 19 and I felt immortal. The plan was just one night. I'll walk in the morning, camp, walk out the next day, and the whole first day was fine, except it was really quiet. You get quiet patches in the woods sometimes. Birds knock off, everything holds its breath for a moment, but then it always starts back up. But this one didn't start back up. Quietest woods I've ever stood in, a whole day too. I went ahead and made camp in it anyway, on account of being 19, as I said before. So around dusk, I'm out gathering wood. I'm whistling while I do it. Some song I don't even remember. Didn't even know I was doing it either. But that's when, I swear to you, the woods whistled it back. He stopped there and cleared his throat. The two of us remained glued to our seats. It was the same tune I whistled, and it came from off east in the trees. I stopped, then it stopped. I stood there telling myself it was some kind of bird. There are birds out there that'll mimic you perfectly. That's a real thing. I then heard the 4 notes again, closer, but the pitch had been shifted. It wasn't as right as it was before. I didn't sleep out there. I sat up against a tree all night with my fire and my knife. And I heard something out there moving around me the whole night, in big, slow circles, and it stayed where the light quit. This is where his story went from campfire spooky to something else entirely. Nick's voice changed, and he quit doing the storyteller thing with his hands. And then, about the worst part of the night, 3, 4 in the morning, it called me. "Called you what?" Aaron said. "It called my name, in my dad's voice." He poked the fire again. "Your grandpa was 300 miles away, sleeping in his bed. And yet I heard his voice coming out of those trees, only a few feet off from me. It said to me, 'Nicky, come help me with this.' So nonchalant. 'Come help me with this.'" Listening to his story, I felt goosebumps on my arm. Aaron had quit chewing entirely. "I'll tell you boys the only smart thing I did that whole trip. I didn't talk to it. I didn't answer it. I knew somehow deep down, like instinctually, don't talk to it. That if I did, something would start. Something bad. So I sat there with my mouth shut all night while my dad's voice tried different things to get me to come to it. 'Come help me, Nicky. I'm hurt.' Whatever, I thought. Then there were other voices I heard too. A buddy of mine, a girl I knew. It tried on different ones to see which made me budge, but none of them did. The moment the sun came up, first light, it quit. It gave up. And I immediately packed my things and walked out of there at a dead sprint. Then came the part he told like a punchline, and yet I never once found it funny. So I get to my car. There's a ticket on it from the police, and it's got a date. Apparently I'd been in those woods 3 days. Not a single night, but 3 days. To me, it was one bad night and back home. But no, your grandpa had already called the sheriff about me. I really lost track of time, I guess. He laughed and shrugged. Anyway, that's my creepy story. There's weird stuff way back in the big woods, boys. The rule is you don't answer it. Never follow it either. And if you do that, it can't do a thing to you. It's all bark. I smirked and rolled my eyes at that terrible pun. We must have looked like two owls ourselves, though, at the end of that story. He took one look at our faces and absolutely died laughing, falling off the log sideways, saying, oh man, your faces," and it broke the spell. Inside 10 minutes, he had us laughing too, and the night rolled on into normalcy. Marshmallows and an argument about whether Blue Eyes White Dragon could beat Godzilla. He can. Then we went to bed. That night, I woke up needing to pee. I lay there, taking a moment to gather my courage to leave the tent. But that's when I heard a man crying. It was undoubtedly coming from Nick's tent, very quiet and held down crying, like he had an arm or a sleeping bag over his mouth. It went on and on, low and steadily, just 10 feet from my own head. My uncle, the funniest, easiest, most alive person I knew, alone in a nylon tent in the dark, crying, like something was broken that could not be fixed, and he was trying really hard to be quiet about it. I didn't get up. I held it until morning. I lay there until the sound stopped, and it took a long time. I never did tell Nick that I heard him crying, and I did not tell Aaron. At breakfast, Nick made griddle cakes. Tried to make them in the shape of our initials, but it was kind of a mess. He acted completely his old self. 11-year-old me stopped thinking about the crying. Maybe it was some girlfriend thing. And I let myself forget about it. If I had to guess now, I think he had brought it up that night. I think he was crying about that story he told at the campfire. That it went deeper than what he let on. And that means that story was true. It was him trying to hand us the rules. Don't answer it. Don't follow it. Dressed up as entertainment for kids. Then he went to his tent, probably couldn't sleep, and cried. That part where he said it's all bark, I don't think it was true. If you ask me, he wasn't able to just walk out of those woods in that story. But what happened in those woods remains a mystery. Because I don't think the thing that circled his camp all night, mimicking voices, I don't think it's something that would just let him stroll out. It led him out. But why? After the fishing trip, life went on. Nothing happened for years. He took us out probably 8 more times through my middle school years, and every single one of those trips was clean. Perfect. He got happier again. Whatever had changed in him changed back. And those middle trips are honestly most of what I think about when I miss him now. He taught Aaron to drive on forest roads with the truck in first gear. He taught me how to tie knots. I still use some of them. For a while, he got obsessed with hammock camping and evangelized it like a religion until a strap let go and slapped him down flat in front of us. Aaron laughed so hard he nearly pulled something. Nick lay in the leaves pointing up at him going, "This is why the tent people win." We didn't hear any strange steps, didn't see any creepy faces, and our fires lit just fine. I stopped flinching at the dark woods somewhere along there, and the first trip finally faded into blurry memory, solidifying the owl as what actually happened. Everything was good until the last trip. On the last trip, everything was wrong, from the get-go. I was 15 then, Aaron was 18. He had a truck of his own and a girlfriend, 1 foot out the door of childhood. Honestly, the trip almost didn't happen, because Aaron almost had plans. Even the way the trip came together was off. Usually a trip meant 3 weeks of build-up, gear lists, Nick calling the house phone to ask whether we wanted to go after walleye or catfish this time, like a waiter taking our order. This one he put together in 4 days, and when he called about it, he did something he hadn't done since I was 10. He asked for my dad's permission again. I was standing in the kitchen, and I heard my dad go, "What do you mean, am I sure, Nick? They're teenagers. You've taken them 100 times now." Whatever Nick said back, my dad laughed at it, hanging up and shaking his head, saying, "Your uncle's getting weird in his old age." Nick was 41. When he picked us up, I noticed right away that he had lost weight since last we saw him, and that had only been 6 weeks back. This wasn't sickly weight, but enough to notice. And the drive out, which was usually the best part, 3 guys and gas station food with Nick doing bits, it was quiet much of the time. During those quiet patches, he kept doing something with his jaw, like he was rehearsing something under his breath. It was weird. He apologized for the weirdness, and he kept apologizing the entire trip. For everything. For nothing. Like, "Sorry the drive's so long, guys." One time he said, "Sorry, I should have gotten more ice," and we hadn't even complained about the ice. He burned a pancake out of a stack of 12 and apologized like he had burned the house down. At one point, Aaron was trying to make a joke and went, "You good, man? You're being weird." Nick looked at him and said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be weird. This is supposed to be fun." And that was the least fun thing he'd ever said. Twice that first full day, we caught him doing the thing with the trees. Let me describe this. The first time I caught him doing this, we had been setting up camp. I turned around to ask him something, and he was standing off in the trees, past the fire ring. He was perfectly still, with his arms down at his sides and his head all the way back. He was staring straight up. Was he looking at a bird or something? I looked up too, to see what he was looking at. There was nothing up there but canopy, leaves and sky through the trees. But he stood there with his face pointing straight up, not moving an inch, and he stayed like that for as long as it took me to go over to him. And that's a longer time than you think. I even called his name twice and got no response. I touched his elbow, and he came back with a start. He genuinely had no idea I was there. He looked at me, and of course he said, "Sorry, what's up?" "Uncle Nick, you were staring at the sky," he replied, completely level. "Oh, was I?" The second time, Aaron found him in the same posture down by the water. He had to shake him to get him to react, actually shake him vigorously. And after that, Aaron and I had a conversation behind the truck. "Something's wrong with Uncle Nick," Aaron said. "I know. Do you think it's like medical wrong or something? Should we go home?" Aaron replied, "He'd never let us. He'd say sorry over and over and guilt us into staying. Maybe he needs us here." We decided we would watch him. If it got worse, we'd make up a reason to leave in the morning. Aaron would say his girlfriend needed him or the truck at home needed something. I really wish we didn't decide to wait. Late in the afternoon, the 3 of us took the loop trail from the lake back toward camp for a walk. It was around a mile, and we fell into our usual order. Aaron way out front because he only had 1 speed, me in the middle, and Uncle Nick behind us. I could hear Nick back there the whole way. The trail was dry and loud, and his steps were right behind me the entire time. A steady crunch, crunch, crunch of an adult's weight. Close enough that twice I said something over my shoulder. Some nothing comment about a cool mushroom, and I got a grunt back. Just a mile of that. We came around the last bend into camp, and I froze, because there was Nick at the fire ring in front of us. He was crouched there with the coffee pot in his hand, looking up at us. He said, "There they are. What, did y'all take the long way?" I stared, slack-jawed. Behind me, the crunch-crunch took 2 more steps and stopped too, and I was instantly reminded of those footsteps 5 years earlier, on a dark hill above a creek. I stood there between my uncle at the fire and the sound behind me on the trail, and I wanted so badly to turn around to see who was actually following me this whole time, but I was too scared, so I did not turn around. I walked forward instead, quickly to the fire ring, and Aaron, who had been too far ahead to hear anything strange, was already asking Nick how he beat us back. "Oh, I cut across the draw," Nick said. But he was looking past us at the trail bend. At nothing, I hoped. And his thumb was moving on the coffee pot handle, a little polishing motion, around and around. I didn't say anything. 15-year-old logic is not 10-year-old logic. I wasn't going to blame this one on an owl. But instead, I pushed it way back, and I said I would think about it later. For now, there was dinner to eat. And because I did that, that last evening was pretty perfect beyond the creepy steps. I don't know how he did it. I've come to believe he did it on purpose, made himself do it. He understood what night it was even if we didn't yet. But from dinner on, for about 4 hours, we got our peak Uncle Nick back. All of it. He retold the bear and the cooler story with a full physical reenactment, playing both himself and the bear. He remembered a Yu-Gi-Oh card I'd traded him when I was 8, a time wizard I'd cried about trading, and he'd quietly given it back a week later. He did the whole negotiation again from memory, doing a funny voice for my little kid voice. Aaron laughed the big dumb laugh he'd had since he was born, and the fire was going. At one point, Nick looked at both of us for a second, smiling, and said, "You know, you two are the best things I ever did. And I didn't even do it. It was your dad. I just showed up after." We groaned and smiled. Around 11, we went to bed. Aaron and I were in the two-man we'd shared our whole lives. Nick's one-man was across the site, like usual. The last thing I heard as I fell asleep was Nick feeding the fire, the popping and shifting sounds of a big log, which was its own kind of lullaby back then. I woke up, though, at some point. Aaron was fighting with the tent. It took me a second to make sense of what was going on. He was up on his knees at the door in the dark. He had the zipper in his fist, pulling at it, yanking it back and forth in these short, violent jerks. The whole tent was shaking with it. He was cussing at it in a whisper. I looked up and said at him, "What the heck are you doing? I'm trying to sleep." Without looking, he said, "I've got to piss, and the zipper's stuck." "Just force it," I said. He grunted a few times as he kept trying, then said, "It's not stuck like stuck, it's stuck like being held there." From outside, close, maybe 5 feet from the door, we heard our uncle's voice. He said, "Boys, I need you to stop touching that zipper." Both of us went still. That was Nick's voice, but with all the joy sucked out of it. He sounded so emotionless. Aaron backed off the door real slow, and we both stared at the black shape of the tent wall. "Uncle Nick?" Aaron said. "Man, I gotta go pee. Quit playing." "I can't let you out," he said right away. "I need you both to hear me. You cannot come out of that tent tonight. If you stay inside until the sun is up, you will see daylight. Both of you." "What? What are you talking about?" Aaron's voice cracked, like it used to when he was 12. "Uncle Nick, what's going on?" It was quiet for some time, and in the pause I could hear the fire behind Nick. The fire was still going, still popping, which meant he'd been out there feeding it the whole time. For hours it had to be. I pictured him sitting out there alone by a big fire, surrounded by darkness, waiting for whatever this was, and I got a feeling in my chest I'd never had before. Nick's voice returned. "I messed up, guys. A long time ago." I could hear the flat voice from him, now giving out in certain parts. It sounded like he was about to cry. "I did something that I shouldn't have, way before you boys. I was young and scared, and I would have said anything, and I did. I said anything. It doesn't forget. It doesn't take a different answer. I've spent every trip since you were 10 keeping myself between it and you, and I thought I could keep doing this forever. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I should never have brought you out here. Not a single time." Aaron was talking over all of it, telling Nick to stop, telling him to open up the tent, saying that we can all get in the truck right now and just go home, or to get Nick some help. I grabbed Aaron's arm, because I'd heard something Aaron had not. It was something off to the left of the door, out in the leaves. Something had started to move. Little rushes, then a stop. More rushing, and a stop. That sound, the one from when I was 10, the skittering sound. It was circling in toward my uncle. And Nick heard it too, because his words started to come out faster. Listen to me. The truck keys are in my tent, side pocket, and the satellite phone is in the truck console. Aaron, say you heard me. I heard you, but whatever you hear tonight, whatever you hear in any voice, you do not answer it, and you don't open that door. It'll try. It knows everyone's voice. It'll use mine. If you hear my voice again tonight, after, it is not. His voice broke in half on the next word, and he began to cry, 5 feet away from us in the dark. It isn't me. You understand? It is not me. You tell your dad. And the skittering rushed. It came in one long burst from the left, so fast, it made everything I'd heard up to then seem slow. And it crossed the whole campsite, and it hit the back wall of our tent, the far wall opposite the door behind our heads, hard enough that the poles bowed in and cracked back, and the whole tent lurched. A stake ripped somewhere, and Aaron and I ended up in the middle of the floor holding on to each other like little kids. My uncle's voice, one last time from further away than it had been, said 5 words with a space between each one. Do not leave that tent. Then there was nothing. I mean nothing. No steps going away or steps at all, no skittering or struggle or voices. Even the fire sounds quit after a while, probably burned itself out with nobody feeding it. The woods went to that dead quiet that Nick had spoken of in his story, the kind that doesn't start back up. Aaron and I stayed still in the middle of that tent floor, gripping each other's arms. We didn't say one word for the remainder of the night. For hours. I'd hear him breathe. He was hearing me breathe. Every so often one of us would flinch at nothing, and the other one would grip harder. That was all we could do until the walls of the tent began to grow brighter. Then twice in those hours something walked the perimeter of the site, slow and on 2 feet, with a stride I knew as well as my own mother's footsteps, and neither of us moved. I bit my own hand, and that thing never spoke. Eventually it wasn't there anymore. When the tent wall was fully gold, backed by actual sunlight, the birds came back. I crawled to the door and put my hand on the zipper, about to pull, but I looked back at Aaron. He nodded, and so I pulled it down. It opened with one smooth pull. I looked outside. The campsite was empty. The firing had gone cold and was full of white ash. Way more ash than a normal night. He must have burned half our wood. Nick's tent stood over there with the door shut. The coffee pot was on the table. I saw his camp chair by the fire, with his jacket over the back of it. That jacket is what got me moving. It was cold that morning, and he loved that jacket. I went to his tent calling his name, unzipping it, but it was empty. The sleeping bag was flat and smooth. Never slept in. I found the keys in the side pocket right where he said. Aaron and I lost it for a while. The two of us were screaming the same man's name, running around the trail spurs. We checked the lakeshore, went back to camp, out again. Aaron kept the whistle rule, God help him, and stood in the middle of the camp, blowing 3 blasts on the orange whistle from Nick's jacket pocket. He did it over and over. 3, then wait, 3, then wait, and the sound of that whistle going out into those trees and coming back with nothing is a sound I'll never get out of my head. Aaron kept it organized, being 18 and suddenly horribly the only adult. We needed to get to the truck and grab the phone. We packed nothing, taking the keys and the whistle, and started up the trail moving fast, calling Nick's name every minute or so. We were about 2/3 of the way to the trailhead when I saw him. There he was off the trail, downhill, openly standing in the hardwoods. But he was completely naked, no boots even, in the middle of the woods in the cold, arms down at his sides. It reminded me of how he had been staring at the sky, but now he wasn't staring up. His head was level, staring straight ahead, and his skin was so pale. All the color had drained from him. The man was absolutely still. I've never seen anyone living that still. Was he even breathing? He was. Breathing so shallowly, I had to watch his chest for several seconds to finally see something. We ran down to him. We said everything to him, his name, our names. We told him it was us, and that it was daytime, that we had to leave. We even told him it was safe now, which we really had no business saying, because we had no idea what was going on, or if it was really safe. His eyes never once moved to us. Aaron took his own jacket off and put it around Nick's shoulders. Nick didn't help it happen, but didn't stop it either. When Aaron took his arm and said, "Come on, we're going to the truck," and pulled gently, nothing happened. My Uncle Nick did not move an inch. When I tried with his other arm, it was like trying to pull a parking meter. 160 pounds of my uncle was rooted to the ground in a stand of hardwoods, wearing my brother's jacket on his shoulders, eyes wide open. And the last thing we tried, I'm the one who tried it, was I got right in front of his face, an inch away, both hands on his face, and I said to him, "Uncle Nick, it's Danny. It's Danny, and you're okay. It's Danny." Nothing came to his eyes, but down one side of his face, while I held it, there came one tear, just the one. I've always wondered if it was just the cold making his eyes run, but I could never be sure. We left him there. It was the only call to make, but never in my life has it felt like the right thing to do. Aaron said we had to do it. There was no moving this man. We couldn't carry him half a mile uphill ourselves. We had to get to the truck. We had to call someone. Then we could come right back, with help, and he was right. So we ran. We got to the truck, unlocked it, and there was the satellite phone in the console. That ancient brick of a thing Nick had kept in every vehicle he'd owned, since before I could remember. And it had a charge. It worked. Aaron's hands were shaking so bad that I had to dial. Search and rescue came. Deputies, too. My dad drove a 3-hour drive, and only 2. They found Nick exactly where we had left him, and how we had left him, standing there. It took 4 grown men to get him onto a litter, and not because he was fighting, but because he wasn't helping at all. The man stayed rigid, and they carried my uncle out of the woods like a statue. I watched it happen from the trailhead. My dad stood next to me, watching his little brother come up the hill on a stretcher with his eyes wide open. My dad made a sound I'd never heard him make. 1 syllable, and he put his hand on top of my head like I was a 5-year-old. The hospital kept him for 1 day, just 1. And you're not gonna like the reason any more than I ever did. There was nothing wrong with him. Nothing at all that they could find, not a mark on his body. He should have had some damage from the weather. He had apparently stood barefoot in 40-degree woods for most of a night, but his blood work was normal, all the scans too, and there wasn't a drug found in his body. By that afternoon, he was, in their words, responsive. He would look at you when you talked. He would nod or shake his head. He drank water when it was put in his hand. But he never spoke a word, not to the doctors or to my dad. When they asked him if he understood where he was, he nodded. And when they asked if anything had happened to him out there, he looked at my dad, then he looked out the window. He was discharged the next morning into my dad's care. My dad took him home to his house, got him set up in his recliner with the TV on. Nick squeezed his hand, which everybody took for a good sign, and my dad ran out for groceries and to grab a change of clothes from our house. My dad was only gone about an hour and a half. When my dad got back, my uncle had gotten his revolver from wherever he had kept it. He was gone. He lay lifelessly in the recliner with the TV still on. I was 15. They didn't let me hear the details of the incident for years, and the details when I finally got them were only these. It was quick, and he had done it in the hour and a half that my dad was gone. It was clear he had been waiting to be alone the whole time, like it was the last chore he had to do. Uncle Nick didn't even leave a note. That tortured my dad for years. My dad did not have closure. But I did. Because Uncle Nick had left a note, days early, spoken out loud to the only two people it was really addressed to. Those warnings he had spoken through a tint wall. When he told us he had messed up a long time ago and apologized repeatedly. He told me to tell my dad, but he never got to the end of the last sentence. What was I supposed to tell my dad? Ever since then, I've been trying to figure it out. What do I tell him? Nobody even knew what happened to Nick. The sane reading was that my uncle was sick. Nobody knew it, nobody caught it. The weight loss was a symptom, and the apologies were symptoms. And that voice at the tent was a breakdown. Two terrified boys dreamed the rest into the gaps. But none of that explains the face we saw on the first trip. Back when I was 10 and he was so very happy and healthy. No problems then. And that certainly was not an owl. And it doesn't explain the mile of footsteps behind me while my uncle crouched at a fire ring ahead of us. We decided to tell our dad everything that same week. The tent and the voices and everything. He listened to our stories without one interruption. Then he said simply, "I believe you." Maybe he did. Maybe he knew that's what he needed to say so that his sons could get through this. Either way, that first year when I couldn't sleep, he'd sit up with me at the kitchen table, telling stories about Nick till it got light out. But still, Nick's last sentence was never finished. Tell your dad. For years I assumed the missing end of it was an apology. Tell your dad I'm sorry. And I let it be that. But it bothered me as I got older, because the more I replayed that night in my head, the more I heard how he was talking. He wasn't rambling. He had been going through a list of things, where his keys were in the side pocket, get the phone, don't answer the voice, don't open the tent. Every item on the list was there because we would need it. And then he said, tell your dad. So that had to be part of the checklist as well. But how? So in my 20s, I began to ask questions. But I had to be careful. My dad didn't talk about Nick easily in those years. I'd get him going on the good stuff, the two of them as kids, then steer around the edges of the conversation. Like what Nick was like at 19 or 20. Did he always camp alone back then? My dad answered what I asked, and nothing more. And this little dance went on for a long time. I was fishing for the right answer, but he would just let me fish. That is until one night in Dad's kitchen. Both of us were up late. My kids were sleeping in the guest room, and he set his cup down and said to me, "You always keep circling something. Just go ahead. Ask it." I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Did anything ever happen to Uncle Nick when he was 19? Camping alone, I mean. You mean the time he got lost? He said. He began to repeat the same story that Nick had told us, except from the outside, from Dad's perspective. He told us about the sheriff calling the house and my grandpa driving through the night. Nick's car was found sitting at a trailhead for 3 days with a notice on it under the wiper. Some search and rescue folks were about to go in after him when he came walking out on his own, at a dead sprint. That was already different from Nick's story. He said he came out, found a ticket, and drove away. Then my dad told me another part. He wasn't right after that. A couple of weeks went by and he still wouldn't talk about it. He hardly talked at all, really. One morning I got up about 4 for my shift, and he was standing out in the backyard. The image of Nick in those woods standing there still popped into my mind. I knew what he was about to say. Yeah, he was just standing facing the trees. I went out there wondering if he was sleepwalking, but he wasn't. His eyes were open. So I asked him, "What in the world are you doing out here?" Well, he looks right at me and he said, "It knows where I live now." He said I should not have said yes. I never knew what that meant. I was so taken aback by what he had just told me. I was 25 years old, had a new baby and a shift starting at 5. I told him he'd had a bad scare and a bad dream, and I told him he had to quit camping alone. I took him inside then and made some coffee. By the next time it came up, he was laughing about the whole thing. Lost track of time, he said, with a laugh. And it was good, really good to see him laugh like that. And I was so proud of myself. Like I was the one that helped him get over it. But I think I was just the one that helped him hide it. I was a selfish idiot. I just wanted things to be normal again. My dad sat there staring at the table. Then I asked my next question. "You remember all those years he wanted to take us camping with him, right? And you would say he had to wait till we're older. Wait till Danny's 10. I always thought it was just dad stuff, but was it just dad stuff?" He mashed his fingers together, still staring at the table, and laid his chin on top of them. Without looking at me, he asked, "Why do you think I kept telling him no?" If you'd asked me back then, I'd have told you car wrecks or drowning. The stuff you call normal dad stuff, but that wasn't it. Every time he asked, and he asked for years, my little brother, best man I ever knew, asking to take my boys camping. Well, something in my gut sat up and said, "Not yet." I couldn't have told you why. I never put it together with me finding him out in the yard. Not once. I just kept saying "not yet," and I did that for years. And then you stopped? Then I stopped. It had been so long. He was my Nick. You had turned 10. There was nothing to point at, and you can't run a family on a feeling. Turns out, you can't run one without it, either. He paused, and I took that moment to relay to him Nick's final message to us. And I asked him directly, what did that message mean? Why did he tell us, "Tell your dad"? I don't think he was apologizing, Dad said. He was sending it home. I'm the only person alive who was there for the start of it. He knew I'd remember that moment in the yard. He told me the truth one time in his whole life standing in my backyard at 4 a.m, and I talked him out of it. So I think I got my answer from my dad, and it revealed to me the weight that my dad had been carrying. I soon found out that Aaron was carrying a weight too, but differently. Aaron was never the type of guy to talk about his feelings. And for a long time after this, I mistook that for him coping. He finished school and married a girl. He had his boys, and somewhere in there he got into backpacking. That's how I heard about it, through the grapevine. Aaron's real into backpacking now, someone said. Ultralight gear and long solo trips. When I heard that, I thought, honestly, good. The woods were where we had Nick. I still camped too. Then a few years ago, his wife called me. She asked me to talk to him. She's worried. that I need to check the garage. That weekend, I drove up to his place. In Aaron's garage, on the wall over his workbench, was a map of the national forest. The whole forest, the real topographic sheets, taped together 6 feet wide. It was divided into numbered sections in his handwriting, and most of the sections were shaded in pencil. Each shaded one had little dates in the corner going back years. There was a shelf of labeled SD cards from trail cameras, a logbook even. My brother had been walking a grid through the forest alone, a section or two at a time, for nearly 10 years now, and the family called it backpacking. We had it out right there in the garage when he found me. We couldn't do it in the house. His boys were in there. I was not calm during this. I said outright what I felt, that he was going to end up like Nick, and I wanted that to sting. And I'm pretty sure it did. He said to me, "I can't just go on not knowing what happened to him." "You can, I'm sure you can. And I don't mean that to be mean, Danny. I'm glad you can move on. I mean that. But I can't. Aaron, come on, man. We know what happened to him." "No, we don't. We know how it ended. We don't know why it ended. Those aren't the same things." "All right then, Aaron. Tell me you haven't been wasting your time then. After all of this," I gestured to his project on the walls. "Have you found anything? Are you able now to explain what he went through and why?" Honestly, I was bluffing, trying to get a rise out of him, trying to prove a point, that he was wasting his time and he should stop with this. But then he said to me, "One time, a few years back, at Section 11, he pointed. "I was packing out at dusk. I was behind schedule. About 100 yards off in the timber, something said my name, Danny." Aaron looked right at my face as he talked. It was in his voice, and it said my name in his voice twice. And here's what I need you to hear. I know the rule. I've known the rule since I was 13. But that voice sounded so happy to see me. I swallowed hard, scared of what he was about to say. But he shook his head, and he closed his eyes. No, I didn't say anything to it. I did exactly as Nick had taught us. I kept my mouth shut, and I walked to the truck, and didn't even run. He looked at the map. But I stood there first, Dan. I stood there and thought about it. It was his voice. It had been 8 years since I heard my Uncle Nick, and some part of me was standing in that timber thinking, what if it's not all it? What if some piece of Uncle Nick was in there? He stood with us our whole lives, for the short time we really had him. But there I was, hearing his voice, turning around and driving home like a coward, driving home to a warm supper. He wiped his eyes, which had gone wet. "I'm sorry, Danny. The grid stays up. Somebody has to keep looking. But don't worry about me. I'm not going to make the same mistake." So we made a deal in that garage. Instead of making peace, we made a deal. He keeps to the rules, as he promised. All of them. And he doesn't stay till after dark. And I asked if he could call me from the trailhead every time he goes in, and every time he comes out. And you know what? He's never missed a call in all the years since, and I finally have peace of mind. But I'll be honest with you. I'm so scared of the day he'll come back and something will be wrong. And I'm gonna go out there finding him in the backyard staring at the woods. What do I do when my brother tells me that something out there now knows where he lives? Yeah, so to be completely honest here, there were parts of this story when I read it and did the dialogue that I started to tear up myself. I try to put myself in the character's shoes when I do some of the dialogue. The bare minimum for narration work, really. But with stories like these, you can go a bit deep. And whether it's true or fictional, I felt for these characters. Rest in peace, Uncle Nick, and stay safe in the woods, everyone. Good night. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this episode of Unexplained Encounters. I am your host, Darkness Prevails. Follow me on X at Dark Prevails. If you're on YouTube, you should be listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Just go on there and search for Unexplained Encounters, and you'll have such a better listening experience. Got a scary story of the unknown? Send it to me at darkstories.org. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.